Hello, ART195, and welcome to remote instruction for May 20th. The discussion for today's JPEGs has been created in Canvas. And remember, based on what's due today, that if you go back to the May 6th video, I showed how to make the JPEG with the blue and the red background. And I also showed the skin, what that mask looks like that is due for today. And then I also showed ways of manually enhancing your mask and even painting hair for what'll be due on the 27th and the final day of class. Also, if you recall, or if you don't, just go back and look, the May 13th video, the one I released last week, I talk about how to create a great hierarchy in your magazine based on past student examples. And then I also talk about, the grade calculations based on making a guess at what you think you'll get on the final. And in today's video, we'll talk more about the grades for the final project. First, let's look in detail what's due for the 27th, and then we'll kind of talk about the pros and cons for us of being online, as far as what's going to be easier for us and what's going to be more difficult for us as we finish out this semester. So due on May 27th at 3 p.m. we will have a Zoom process check of your final project, the magazine cover. It should look 100% finished. The idea here is that you show us 1 week before it's actually due for a graded process check, but then that way you can get feedback from the class, from myself, as to what could make it better for the following week. So to get the 36 out of 40 grade by 2 p.m., put your folder on the discussion for May 27th that contains your Illustrator file and your Photoshop document. If you are using fonts that are, I normally say not on the classroom computers, but actually, let me just change that. Yeah, so basically everyone needs to do this now, because I have no idea what machines you're using. So it now says, to avoid font complications, include a second artboard in the Illustrator file that has your fonts outlined. Now, if that doesn't make sense to you, that's based on video instruction that I have, and let me just show you where that is. And in fact, we're going to be talking quite a bit about these first 3 videos on here in this video right now. So instructional videos, turn in files, and this first one I show you how to create what I'll call a bulletproof Illustrator file for turning in. And one of the things that you do as you watch this video is create a second artboard, and then you select all of the type on that second artboard, outline it, label that artboard above the artboard, and it says outlined. That way, if you were to pass this file on to someone else and they opened it up, they might see all your fonts on the left outlined in pink, meaning they're not available on their machine, but they would see what your intentions are for this file via the artboard on the right, where the fonts are outlined, because they still show up if they're outlined, show up exactly the way you wanted them. And before I leave this page, so when I take you back to my document in Word to talk more about the final, we're going to be talking about this video for making the Illustrator file. We're going to be talking about these 2 videos, this one and this one, that will show you how to take everything that you've done for the magazine project and convert it into one JPEG that fits nicely in a web environment. Now, you've already done this for the Celebrity AI project, but now we're dealing with a final project where the points are quite a bit higher. Okay, and as I said, your project should be 100% finished at this point, just ready for suggestions for improvements. You'll lose points on this process check if I open up your Illustrator file and the image or images or fonts are missing. So the fonts, we just talked about how to make sure that doesn't happen, but the images, you want to make sure that the folder that you give me has your Illustrator file and the Photoshop document that you placed. So in other words, that Photoshop document that you've been working on, adding all that texture to your face. If you included anything else, for example, sometimes people put a separate image for the background and also place that in Illustrator. You want to make sure basically that you're giving me a complete folder. All right, so you want to make sure that this is going to work, that I'm going to be able to open up that folder, see the Illustrator document, double click on it, and everything reassembles itself inside of Illustrator. Now, here's one of the things that's a little bit difficult about the remote instruction. If you were in the classroom environment, you could just simply take what you were about to turn into me, put it onto a computer that you haven't used before, open it up, and you would see exactly what I would be seeing. Since you don't really have the option to do that, you just want to make sure that you're doing everything right, that you place that document. Now, or that you place the Photoshop documents. Now, one way that you could test this on the same computer is you could just simply create a brand new file on your desktop, put your Illustrator file in that folder, rename it slightly, then copy the image or images into that folder. Go into that folder, double click on the newly named Illustrator file, and if everything opens up, you should be good. If not, use the little like pop-up warning that comes up. Tell Illustrator where to find your images, which it should be able to find them because they're right next to it, right? As long as everything's in the same folder. That's how you make sure that doesn't go bad. Okay, and then I'm going to talk more in detail about how to make sure this works on the final day. And then just a reminder to check your grades. As of yesterday, everything that you had sent to me has been input into the grades. And remember, you have basically 2 late weeks to still turn grades in. Nothing can be turned in after the final class meets. Okay, you can read through this on the announcement if you like, but I'm going to go into a little more detail over here on this, talking about the last day. Okay, so we got an easier thing and a harder thing for our final. The easier is that we cannot print, so that's one less thing that you have to worry about. The thing that's more difficult for us is that we don't have the multiple computers like I talked about. So for the final, you definitely want to test this stuff out the best you can, and I just described a way of doing that by creating a new folder and renaming your document, and then it kind of feels like you're opening it for the first time. But another thing to assist is that I will check your Illustrator file and your Photoshop file on May 27th. So let me back up and explain this. So on the final day, you're going to be turning in a folder that contains your Illustrator file, the Photoshop document that you've been working on, and a JPEG file that fits an exact web environment. Now, I just went to the Prof. Steve G and talked about these 3 videos here under Turn in Files that are going to help you get there. So on the 27th, you are welcome to just make sure you tell me what you're doing in the email. I want you to check my Illustrator file, for example. I want you to check my JPEG, for example. And these are penalty-free checks. So you watch the video, you do. If you get it wrong, it's no big deal because it's a week early, not due until June 2nd or 3rd. And then also the same thing, I will check a JPEG per videos 2 and 3. Okay, now, however, when the file is turned in on June 3rd, the Illustrator and the Photoshop document per video 1 and the JPEG per video 2, there are no redos. So this is your final project. It counts as 20% of your grade. So you really want to take the time, learn what you're supposed to learn from those Turnitin videos, because file management is a big deal in graphic design. As you can imagine, you send something to the printer and it's wrong, they can't print. Send something to a client and they can't open it up, they can't give you feedback, let you know what's going on, makes you look unprofessional. Also, you definitely need to be able to convert files like, an Illustrator file to a JPEG or a PNG, which is really what that second and third video is all about. So you have the opportunity to do a free check. It doesn't mean that on May 27th, if you turn this stuff into me for the process check, that all I'm doing on that day, let me just rephrase that, all I'm doing on that day is checking those files. So if I tell you that it's correct, I still expect you to turn one in on June 3rd, because the idea is that you have between May 27th and June 3rd to make your project even better. But even if your project is, in your opinion, and maybe mine even, awful at that point, you just haven't refined your mask enough, you haven't experimented with textures enough, still do this. It's just your way of testing that on June 3rd you will be able to make an Illustrator file that is bulletproof, and that you will be able to make a JPEG that maxes out or fits in that web environment size that I describe on videos 2 and 3. So I know that's pretty long-winded in theory. This is pretty easy. I'm just saying you got to get these files to me, but they have to be perfect. So that's why I tried to maybe over-explain today so that you couldn't miss out on anything. But given that you have an opportunity to turn this into me on May 27th, penalty-free, I think that goes as far as we can go into trying to make life as fair as possible. But if you got it right on May 27th and you just screw it up somehow on June 3rd, I have to go by what you give me on June 3rd. So again, no redos. So just be incredibly careful. Pretend it's like for a big important client or a grade, whatever means more to you. And that ought to do it. So I will shoot out one more video next week, but I think you've got enough stuff in this video to get you through the semester. Talk to you soon.